and welcome back to another episode of Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'm your host, Amanda Aliberti. Today we welcome Kerry, who's an adult international adoptee. Kerry's going to share her story of being raised in a transracial adoptive family and what her experience has been like over the years. Now let's turn to Kerry. So welcome, Kerry.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So do you want to start, Kerry, by maybe talking a little bit about your background and maybe the makeup of your family?
Yeah. So I was adopted from Guangzhou province, and I was about 11 months when I was adopted. And my mother is Taiwanese, my dad is American, and I have a sister who's biologically related to my parents, and she's Asian American, Taiwanese American. And, you know, growing up, I always knew I was adopted. Having my biological sister kind of definitely solidified that, but it also never changed, our relationship. We did have a very big age gap, about 7 years. But, we'd always have a good sisterly relationship, obviously we had our, little arguments, but it was great.
How old were you when you were placed?
So I honestly, I don't know. From what I know, I was dropped off in a little basket on, the front porch of the orphanage, or the front, stairs of the orphanage. And, then I was, Okay. So that's I don't really know much background about my birth parents. But I know with the political climate in China, there is that one child policy that definitely impacted a lot of adoptions, especially of Chinese girls, baby girls. So, I definitely think about that. And I know that, that could be a factor into why I was placed. But yeah, I don't really know a whole lot of my,
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, that's very true for a lot of international adoptees. Usually, it's not as common to have open adoption, right? Talk to me a little bit about your experience growing up with your family and kind of how you came to be who you are, how you figured out your identity, and what that process looked like.
Yeah, so I like to think I grew up in a very liberal family. My parents wanted to expose me to my Asian culture and heritage, and by doing so, I went to Chinese school every Saturday morning. My sister and I were required to go to Chinese school. At first I was like, well, why am I having to go to school on the weekends? But I really enjoyed it. It was another community that I felt I didn't really stand out, which is really nice. Growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood and predominantly white schooling, it allowed me to also grow up in a community where I felt not standing out, I guess, as I said before. And then also since my mom is Taiwanese, we would go to travel to Taiwan every summer. And my parents would also put us in intensive culture language programs, immersive, living away from home. And it was great. I loved being able to learn more about my heritage, learn the language, learn more about my culture. And through that, I was able to really know a lot about where I come from, and then embrace that. I've never been why am I Asian? I've always been I'm Asian and it's cool. I love sharing my culture with other people. I love, educating. I love sharing my stories. I think it's so exciting to be able to do so. And I also love hearing other people's stories. So when I do that, I'm always when I was younger, I used to go to Taiwan and the night markets were so fun. I would go and eat so much food with my parents. And so through that, I was able to really be a lot more comfortable with being Asian in America. Whenever I'd come back to America after those trips, I'd be yes, I knew that I stood out, but I was hear about my trip, like hear about all this, like these new things that I learned about my culture, like these fun activities, learning about calligraphy and art and like martial arts. Like I was a part of so many great programs in Taiwan that really allowed me to be like, whoa, this is so cool. And I want to share this with everyone else. And I, love doing that. And I, hope I can continue to do that. And it really allowed me to embrace who I am and continue to do so.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like your parents did a fabulous job of kind of exposing you to the culture through food, through language, through education, through travel. I mean, these are all the basics of what we talk about in transracial adoption, and the fact that your parents really took the opportunity to kind of embrace all of that is really powerful, and clearly it shines through because you're so proud of your culture. And that's really neat.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about if you have ever experienced any sort of discrimination or racism, especially with what's been going on in the world today within Asian culture. Talk to me a little bit about that piece.
Yeah, so growing up, obviously in the comfort of my home, I had never been like, oh, I stand out because I'm fully Asian compared to, my sister. But in public social context, I became a lot more aware of my Asian identity and how people saw me from the outside. So they see me as an Asian woman or a Chinese girl. And a lot of questions that I would get was like, what are you? And initially I'd be like, well, I'm Chinese and I'm adopted from China, not really understanding the initial issue in that question of what are you, kind of that dehumanizing question. And as I got older, I was like, well, I am a human, I am Chinese, and I am adopted. And if you would like to learn more about my heritage, I'm happy to share it with you, but please know that don't phrase it as what are you, as if it's almost like I'm not human. And growing up and having to adjust and make that realization of, it's not necessarily their fault, it's more of like lack of education or lack of just knowing. And it's my job to not necessarily, yes, I get very frustrated. But for me, like, I always like to think that I just want to come at it with sharing knowledge, wanting to educate and just be like, hey, actually, that's a microaggression. And you should say like, where are you from? Or what's your background? And just more acknowledging, yes, I am different and that's okay. And I'm happy to answer questions about my culture, my heritage, my background, but recognize me in a humanistic way where I'm not what, but I am, where are you from? Like, what's your background? I would talk to my parents and be like, hey, this, when I was younger, I'd be like, hey, like someone asked me and kind of like, what are you? And why are your eyes so small? Or, why? And I would be like, well, like I'm Chinese, and that's, a lot of, that's what I look like. And that's okay. And, I did struggle a little bit with also like Western beauty standards. For sure, growing up as like a girl and social media, especially in my generation, was really tough, but through lots of self-reflection and just working through it, I am like, I'm unique, and that's the beauty in it. And being different is beautiful, and we should embrace that. And I do, and I love it. And with everything going on today, it does make me a little nervous to go out in public sometimes, because I know, as I said before, from the outside, people see me as an Asian woman, but, a Chinese woman. And, I know I get looks, but, that doesn't scare me away anymore. Obviously I'm very aware, so I'm very cautious of my surroundings. But, I like to think that I can stand, I can hold myself, and if something were to happen, and if something does happen, I just want to come at it as, hey, like, that's a microaggression. I'm a Chinese woman. I'm human. I have a great background of culture and different cultures and fun, and so through that, I hope to just, again, like, share my story through just education. And
I think that's a really positive way of reacting, because sometimes people will immediately go to anger, because sometimes people can be not so nice, right, in how they approach things. But a majority of the time, I do think it's that they're trying to understand, they're curious, this is something new. But you're right, how we phrase things, the words we use, the questions we ask are really important. And I think that if people could come from a place of just trying to learn and understand your story, as opposed to maybe putting these stereotypes on you or questioning you in a way where you feel like you're not a human, that's the words you used, I think is really significant in kind of overcoming this world of, like, people just criticizing and judging, right? So I think that's really important, and it seems like you've come full circle. You're a really stable individual. You've chosen to kind of use education, and that's amazing, because I think that's a positive way of handling it. Thank you so much, Kerry, for sharing your story. We're hopeful that this will help other adoptees so that they can know kind of what to expect in the future. Please tune in next week as we continue these great conversations with Kerry, and she offers some advice for other transracial adoptive families, as well as what her experience has been like working with adoptions from the heart. Thanks so much, guys, and tune in next week.